Ben Cohen just exposed the military-industrial complex.
They're giving political donations to the legislators, legalized bribery.
In an appearance on Tucker Carlson's show, the ice cream maker turned activist called out the absurdities in our defense sector, especially the Pentagon's outrageously bloated budget.
What's crumbs to the Pentagon can really provide some real stuff that we need here in the U.S.
And so today we're going to cover his eye-opening takes. Just watch this clip before I give you the bigger picture.
The U.S. chooses to spend, look at this. This is a chart of the federal discretionary budget. That's the amount of money that Congress has each year to allocate to the various departments. So the big red one on top, that gets over half, that's the Pentagon. And these little slivers are like, USAID, the Education Department, the Health Department, Community Development, whatever else the country does. But in terms of stuff that would actually be helpful to people living in their daily lives, it's all sucked out by the Pentagon.
Now, for some background, Ben has been a longtime backer of Bernie Sanders, so you have to keep that in mind. Even if the Department of Defense had its funding reduced, he'd likely push for that money to be redirected towards social safety nets. That being said, his criticism of the defense budget isn't without merit. The numbers don't lie. Over the years, the Pentagon's spending has ballooned, and for this fiscal cycle alone, it's set at an astonishing $2.23 trillion with a T dollars, or 15.2% of the federal budget. While national security is a priority, that doesn't mean the military's finances should go unchecked. There's a difference between funding defense and then just writing blank checks.
There was recently a fighter jet that fell off an aircraft carrier. So it was a $70 million fighter jet. So, that sounds kind of dramatic that, a $70 million fighter jet fell off an aircraft carrier. But if you think about the Pentagon budget as a box of Cheerios, that $70 billion would be 1/10 of one Cheerio, which is enough money, if you take it out of the Pentagon, to build 2 new hospitals in West Virginia. What's crumbs to the Pentagon can really provide some real stuff that we need here in the U.S.
That's not even the full picture. The Yemeni operation reportedly resulted in the loss of 7 MQ-9 Reaper drones, which cost around $200 million, and another F-18, which lost on the same carrier. Thankfully, no one was hurt, and I'd like to wish Godspeed to our service members. But if we do the simple math, we're talking about $340 million down the drain. That can make the argument that government's role isn't building hospitals like Ben did, but the money could have gone towards fixing broken infrastructure, reinforcing communities hit by natural disasters, even making a tiny dent in the servicing national debt. We expect accountability in the area of government. Why not here too? Ben went on to explain the role of the military-industrial complex playing in maintaining such bloated spending, and nothing's going to prepare you for what you're about to hear.
You said that there was an association of weapons manufacturers that were lobbying Congress to expand NATO. It seems a little bit crazy that weapons manufacturers would be allowed to dictate foreign policy because the conflict is so obvious.
Well, it's just money, so they're lobbying, they're giving political donations to the legislators, legalized bribery. And it's definitely a conflict of interest. And they keep on justifying these huge expenditures by coming up with enemy after enemy after enemy.
Before we even get into the part about constantly needing new enemies to justify staying in business, it's worth focusing on the massive lobbying machine behind the defense industry. According to data from Open Secrets, between 1998 and 2025, defense contractors spent around $3.2 billion in trying to secure support for their insane spending. Now here's where things get crazy. Just this year alone, the site mentions that this massive interest group had 818 lobbyists, with 60% of them being former government employees. That isn't just about influence, it's about access. These former insiders knew exactly who to call, what doors to knock on, and how to shape the messages to get approved without any pushback.
First it was the Soviet Union, So the Soviet Union collapsed. And Gorbachev said at the time, "We will deny you of an enemy." And, I assumed that the Pentagon budget was going to, drop hugely because that was the whole justification for it. But what the Pentagon did was that they came up with what was called the two-war scenario. So now instead of the Pentagon budget being structured to defeat the Soviet Union, now what they said is it needs to be structured to fight two medium-sized wars in two different places at the same time. And what do you know? That's going to cost just as much as we were spending on preparing to fight the Soviet Union.
And here is another piece of information that'll blow your mind. You've probably seen these polished reporters from the tanks loaded with charts, forecasts, and expert analysis that supposedly shape policy. Well, according to a brief by Ben Freeman, who is an expert on lobbying and foreign influence in U.S. policy, quote, 21 out of 27 think tanks he examined received funding from the defense sector. What does that mean? Well, these institutions publish research that conveniently aligns with the interest of the military-industrial complex, then major media outlets pick up those studies, giving them legitimacy. The narrative spreads, gets echoed across panels and articles, and eventually lands in the lap of lawmakers. By the time it reaches Capitol Hill, it's presented as common sense, which in turn funnels more resources to defense. All of this feeds the same handful of companies year after year. It's a well-oiled feedback loop, and some would call it an infinite money glitch that turns taxpayer dollars to corporate profit, but it doesn't stop here. They've also built a backup plan just in case the cycle we ever talk about breaks.
There's this other aspect of so-called political engineering. Military contractors these weapons manufacturers would deliberately spread out the jobs for a particular weapon system in as many congressional districts as possible. And so, that creates jobs, and the politician from that area, that's what they, that gives them a lot of credit.
Of course.
I've brought jobs to my district. And so, for say the F-35, it's probably made in over 400, congressional districts. You can't stop it because they've politically engineered it.
Exactly, and this isn't some partisan issue. Both Republicans and Democrats have consistently backed this system, showing that when it comes to protecting the status quo, the two sides are often on the same team. It's one of those rare issues that proves the existence of the uniparty, in my opinion. But I'd love to know your thoughts here, so let's get the conversation rolling in the comments down below. And if you want your friends to get coverage from an independent source like myself, please share the video with them. It helps a ton. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.